Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has been addressing the German parliament in Berlin. He's in the German capital, for a two-day conference on Ukraine's post-war recovery. The Ukrainian leader has made an urgent appeal to supply his country with more air defense systems. He's being hosted by German Chancellor Olaf Scholz, who's called on allies to continue to support Ukraine and its reconstruction. A priority will be its energy sector, which has been devastated by Russian air attacks. Cities on the front lines have suffered the brunt of those attacks. Ukrainian officials expect the costs to rebuild those areas to run into hundreds of billions of dollars. Zelenskyy appealed to German lawmakers to ensure Russia is held to account.
Our own goal is peace. Is there a continental dream that we have apart from a peaceful Europe? No. Our only obligation is to defend our peoples, our Europe, the international order which is based on rules. But Russia has different goals and dreams. Russia is standing against all of us alone. So we all have to force Russia to change. And it's possible because there is no wall that cannot be brought down.
And joining me now in the studio to talk about Zelenskyy's appearance in the Bundestag is DW's Eastern Europe editor Roman Goncharenko. And joining me from the German Parliament, the Bundestag, is Chief Political Editor Michaela Köfner. But Roman, first to you, what did you make of this speech, and were there any surprises there for you?
Well, a few points. So first, I think it is very important that President Zelenskyy came to Berlin. This is his first speech in the German Bundestag. And it comes at a very pivotal moment in this war because the Russian forces are advancing. So Ukraine has been weakened by a long period of not having enough weapons from the United States, not having enough soldiers to fight. So Ukraine is mobilizing now, the weapons are coming, but still Russia is advancing. Russia seems stronger at the moment. And we have also had some historical red lines being crossed by the West, saying that Ukraine can now hit military targets inside Russia with Western weapons. And Germany said yes as well. It has been a taboo for over 2 years. We are now talking about probably France and maybe some other countries sending troops to Ukraine. It's still in discussion, but it's also a very thick red line. So it is a very pivotal moment for Ukraine. And now he delivers the speech. And what he's saying, I think his key message is, or one of the key messages is, time for compromise is over. So there will be no compromise with Russia. Russia has to pay for what it is doing to Ukraine. And this comes just a few days before this very important conference, important for Ukraine and also for the international community, a peace conference in Switzerland, where Ukraine is trying to show that it is trying also not just to win this war on the battlefield, but is also trying the diplomatic way. We had some criticism of that in Germany and other countries at the beginning of the war. Right. Some political parties in Germany are also trying to make that point that Ukraine is not doing enough on the diplomatic front. This is not the case, and this is also the message by Zelenskyy in Berlin.
To you next, Michaela, in the Bundestag. You've been talking to people in the German parliament. How have they reacted to Zelenskyy's speech?
Well, most were pretty excited to see him personally for the very first time here in the Bundestag. After all, they would have agreed, most of them, to sending billions, some 28 billion worth of support to Ukraine. Germany is Ukraine's second largest supporter. At the same time, as we saw Volodymyr Zelenskyy speak here, two parties who gained significantly in the European elections both boycotted this. One of them, a new party, BSW, had war or peace ? Written on their campaign posters, as if you could simply choose by no longer supporting Ukraine. The other one is the far-right Alternative for Germany that in parts has described itself as pro-Russian. Certainly individual MPs have said that they are a voice for Russia here in Germany. So there was a boycott there. And earlier I got to speak with and Germany's Vice Chancellor, Robert Habeck, from the Green Party, that received quite a battering in these European elections, asking him about how he plans to handle that support for Ukraine might not be a political given for the future. Let's take a listen.
Well, there is a saying, mostly from the right-wing parties, why do we give money to Ukraine? We can use it in our country. From my perspective, this is wrong. The Ukrainians, you have to understand what the cause of the war is. The Ukrainians are not only defending their right for freedom, they are defending the European idea for freedom and peace. So if Putin succeeds in Ukraine, he will not stop. It is our own interest as well that we supply Ukraine with money and also military and defense goods. It is our own interest. So to say we only look in our small environment, our own country, not seeing what is happening in Europe is politically wrong, short-sighted actually.
Now, there's still a broad majority here in Germany to continue support for Ukraine. The Chancellor himself has said that he may have to bolster that support if the United States was limited. But mentioning the United States, Ukraine has in the past learned the hard way that national politics do matter so much. When its largest supporter, the US, had to hold on to support because it simply couldn't get that package, Biden couldn't get that package through Congress. Nowhere near that here, but the tendency is there in these EU elections that we saw over the past weekend.
Michaela, thanks very much for that. Roman, how do you interpret the absence of some of these parties, BSW and the far-right AfD, that Michaela was talking about, and also compare that to the result of the European elections? Where do we stand at the end of that?
Well, I think it looks like an attempt to gain momentum, so to say, because they think that they were so successful during the election to the European Parliament because they were talking about peace, talking about stopping sending arms to Ukraine, because they believe that will stop the war, which Ukraine and its partners don't believe. They think that if the West stops supporting Ukraine, it will be just overrun by Russia, and Putin will not stop at the Ukrainian western border. So now the NATO and EU neighbors of Ukraine could be in danger. And this is also something that we heard today during Zelensky's visit, leading German politicians saying that Ukraine is also defending democracy not for itself, but for Europe as well. And this is something that Ukraine has been saying actually from 2014, when Russia annexed Crimea and then started the war in Donbass. But at that time, the European leaders, European countries were not in a position, or saw themselves not in a position to say that. Now they are saying it, but the price Ukraine is paying for that is very high. And it is, of course, something that Ukrainians are worried about when they see that those parties are so popular, especially in Eastern Germany, where in a few months we will have elections to the local parliaments. And those parties have results at the moment with over 30%. And this is something that worries people in Ukraine. They think that if those parties are successful, so if they are number one in three East German states, that could also somehow influence politics in Berlin. The Chancellor says no. It doesn't look like that. Majority of Germans still support parties or vote for parties that support Ukraine. But there is this tendency that Michaela was talking about, not just in Germany, but also in other European countries. And this tendency could be dangerous for Ukraine.
We'll leave it there for the moment. Roman Goncharenko, DW's Eastern Europe editor, and the chief political editor, Michaela Köfner, reporting from the German Parliament. Thank you both very much for your time.
The town of Vovchansk, one of many on the front lines in recent months. In ashes after relentless Russian bombardment, in a war that rages on with no let-up. Over more than 2 years of conflict, Ukraine has lost 10% of its housing. Many of its farms are full of craters and landmines. Bridges, electrical stations, power plants and dams have been destroyed by missile strikes and explosives. The World Bank released figures earlier this year on the total estimated costs to rebuild Ukraine, $82 billion for housing, $73 billion for transport, commerce and industry, $68 billion, agriculture, another $58 billion, and the all-important energy sector, almost $50 billion. All in all, $486 billion. Although housing costs more to fix, Russian attacks on critical infrastructure pose the most acute danger to Ukraine. Destroyed power stations in many cities like Kharkiv mean long blackouts, power cuts to hospitals, and damage to the water supply. The damage to infrastructure is greatest in the Kharkiv, Donetsk, Kherson, and Luhansk regions, but energy infrastructure in the capital Kyiv has also been hit many times. The pressure at this week's conference is on donor countries to finance Ukraine's future. But in the present, some worry that more focus and money has to be put on keeping the power flowing. Ukrainians face another punishing winter, with wide-scale blackouts and heating shortages. Before they clean up and move on, the people here have to make it through each day.